All right, so the first step of installing your QaromaShop kit is going to be putting the handle on your heater coil. Now just a quick note, if you purchase any QaromaShop kits from Ritual, the heater coils do have a burn-off completed already. If you didn't purchase them from Ritual, we do recommend that you do just a quick 20-minute burn-off. Set your controller at 700 degrees or so, and that makes sure that any of the oils from manufacturing are clean on that coil and that you're getting a nice clean air path. So to install the handle, first you're going to want to lay out your wire and flatten out the 5 wires that are inside of the casing here. Now on the handles, there's 2 different ends. There's an end with 2 little bumps, and then there's an end with a smoother, longer bump. For me personally, I like to put the end with 2 bumps down near my pinky. So the end with the smoother, long bump I'm putting right next to the coil. The main reason I do that is because my pinky fits nicely between the 2 bumps, and I find it's easy when I'm using it, but I would say that's kind of completely up to personal preference. So first here on the wire, we're going to flatten those 5 wires inside. You can feel them kind of stacked up, and so if you just work your way up, you want to make sure that they're all sitting next to each other. Then the next step is you're going to take your coil handle and just start to slide those wires through the slit in the corner. So you can see there we've got them partially inserted, and that's all you need to do. Once you're this far, you're basically there, you've got it. So once the wires are fully inside the coil handle, all you have to do is pull it through. So you can see we've got that pulled through, and now the coil handle, the metal there is bumping up right into our coil. So then you're going to slowly slide the coil inside the handle. It helps me to do a little bit of back and forth rotation as I'm doing this. One thing that we do want to caution you on is if your coil handle is cold. It is currently the winter here in Colorado, and so if you get a package delivered that's cold, we do recommend warming them up just to make sure that that wood doesn't split as you're inserting the coil handle. If you notice any resistance, you can also put it in partially, just let the wood relax for a little bit, let it sit for 10 minutes or so, and then come back and you're ready to finish installation. But this one we're not getting any resistance, slides in nice and neatly, and so I'll put it in until it's just past that notch there. Realistically, you just have to put it in far enough that you have that secure hold. We find in past that notch holds, even for the heaviest devices, our Qaroma XLs, our Baroma XLs, and so that's generally where we go just from a safety standpoint. So now that we have our coil handle installed, I'm going to go ahead and tie these wires back together just to keep them a little bit organized, and then we can move on to the next step of installation, which will be putting the coil inside of our housing. Okay, so now that your coil is installed, the next step is going to be putting your coil inside of your housing and filling it with the included 3mm Aroma ruby pearls. This is really the last step of installation. Once you're done this, you are ready to start ripping. So to get started with the Qaroma housing, we're just going to carefully unscrew the top. A quick note here on the Qaroma, we know that a lot of customers like to get multiple devices and to bounce back and forth. We definitely encourage it. It's how I personally use my QaromaShop devices. For the Qaroma specifically, we do like to advise for you to get a dedicated coil and rubies. This is not mandatory, but the reason we advise that is it reduces the amount of times that you're screwing and unscrewing this, which in our experience has been when you're most likely to accidentally drop something and break it. We want you to be able to enjoy your new device for a long time, and so that's why we do recommend for the Qaroma housing that you buy a dedicated coil and rubies, but again, that is a suggestion. You are welcome to use the devices however you see fit. So the first step here is simply setting the coil down inside of the housing. You want to make sure that the bar that comes from the coil here is below the lip of the housing. The primary reasoning behind that is when you screw the housing shut, the housing upper and lower need to be completely flush. If there's any air gap between the upper and lower, that's going to cause cold air to come in kind of halfway through your housing, and it's going to decrease the overall quality of the hit you're getting. If you isolate the system and make sure that there's no air gap there, you're going to be getting the perfectly temperature air every single time. So now that my coil is inside the housing, I'm going to carefully open this bag of Aroma ruby pearls and start pouring them in. We definitely recommend you do this on a rolling tray or some other tray with a lip on it. These ruby pearls like to run around, so make sure you're being careful in case any don't make it inside the housing. So then you just carefully pour the rubies in one at a time. On the Qaroma, it is a little different than the other housings in the sense that the housing upper has a little bit of tolerance built in. All of the Qaroma has a little bit of tolerance built in so that as you get heat expansion from the temperatures you're running to vaporize, we don't see any cracking in the quartz. And so if you do notice that there's a little bit of wiggle room, that is intentional on the Qaroma. We do have another video coming up soon where we're going to talk about stretching coils, so that if you have a titanium or brass or ceramic housing or stainless steel, you can stretch the coil to give yourselves a really tight fit for the maximum efficiency. So you can see now we have the housing just about full. I went ahead and dropped one ruby out there that I'm going to sneak in. And then for me, I definitely like to fill up my Qaroma. I just think it's fun to see how many you can get in there. I think at the end of the day, the more rubies you have in there, the more power you have coming from the housing and the cleaner flavor. And so I generally will go back in, grab a couple and just kind of stack them up and see how many I can get in there. The only thing to consider as you're doing this is make sure that your housing is still able to screw down flush. So now that we're nice and full of rubies, I'm going to go ahead and take the housing upper, place it on top there, and then gently screw it into place. And as we pick it up, we can see that we're nice and flush between the upper and lower, that there's no gap there, and that this is going to function beautifully. So that is really all the installation required for the DIY kits. You now have all of the components installed, and it is ready to plug in and start using. Now that you have a fully installed Qaroma kit, it's time to start using it. Installation and setup from here is very easy. We're going to take the coil wrap off of the Qaroma, and then we're going to plug that coil right into the front of our digital PID temperature controller here. You also have the plug that goes to the wall here. We're not actually running it right now, but make sure you do that for best operation. And then we're going to set temperatures. For my Qaroma, I like to start at 640 degrees Fahrenheit and then adjust from there. For me, I find it's really dependent on a couple factors. The first of those is going to be what material are you using. Here in Colorado, our material is quite frequently dry, and so if that happens, I find that I generally can drop my temperature a little bit, versus if your material has a really nice cure on it and there's still a lot of humidity in there, generally you can turn temperatures up a little bit. But for the Qaroma, I like to start at 640 degrees, and then all you have to do is set the bowl on your glass. Optionally, you can include a stainless steel screen. This bowl does include a glass screen in there, and so the stainless screen is optional. You're going to use the included scoop tool to go ahead and scoop your material into the bowl, and then all you have to do is set the housing on top and you are ready to go. Just a quick note on safety. As you're using QaromaShop devices, it's really easy to stay safe as long as you recognize that the housing and everything on this end of the coil is extremely hot. And so if you're not using it, the only right place to put it is inside of this suet jade porcelain stand while it's hot. If you are using it, we just grab it, move it over to our bowl while we're taking a hit, and then when we're done taking a hit, right back into the stand. That's really all that we have to talk about today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Definitely check out our inventory at ritual-co.com and check us out on Instagram at ritual_Colorado. Thanks for stopping by, and reach out if you ever have any questions on QaromaShop or any of our products.